Hello my friends, it's Gabriel with The Last Huntsman Outdoors here, and today I'm going to be doing a review of the BeaverCraft Dusk knife. And first of all, I have to give thanks to them. They sent this one to me for review, in which, I don't get very many knives sent to me, so I always appreciate it when I do get some. But as always, I'm going to keep it truthful and fair to you all as well. Let's check this knife out. All right, so here is the BeaverCraft Dusk. It's roughly about 1/8 of an inch thick. It's made out of 1060 carbon steel. It's made in Ukraine. So there's that. Has some jimping on there. Has walnut scales. Leather sheath. The leather on this sheath is kind of thin. We'll talk a little more about that later. But the thing that's really neat about this knife is that it's only $45 for one of these. So if you're like really on the budget end of things, or you just want like a spare knife to hand to somebody else, or a backup to a backup to a backup, kind of as customary on my channel here, we're going to be doing some batoning. First thing first, this 1/8 of an inch thick roughly blade, but it is about a 5-inch blade. It'd make a great little camp knife. Has kind of that mid saber grind. Now, I asked them for the Dusk model because I've seen a lot of their other models were all Scandies, and as you guys know, I'm just not really a big Scandi grind knife guy. So I seen this one and I was like, man, I might try that one out. So this is kind of what I would consider the camp knife size. It's 1/8 of an inch thick, so it doesn't really have much weight or mass. I'm just going to do some light chopping here. So if you have to just delimb something or something along those lines, then it'll actually do pretty good for that. It's not going to do anything heavy for sure. It's a very light and thin and just overall user knife. Task I'm going to do with the BeaverCraft Dusk knife here, I'm just going to do some slicing and get a feel for those ergonomics. And just how well it slices. For it being a lower, kind of a half saber grind, it actually does slice decently well. Now, I did ask them for this knife and they did send it. The reason why I did ask them for this knife was because most of their knives are in a Scandi grind. And as you guys know, I am not a big Scandi grind type of guy. So I picked this one just because it's the saber grind model. And it does actually perform pretty decently well. The ergonomics, they're not like super contoured. They're just kind of blocky but rounded off at the edges type of handles. But it's surprisingly decently comfortable. I mean, especially for a $45 knife, it's kind of hard to go wrong. And you could always, with these being wood and it just having a leather type of sheath, you could always kind of sand these down a little bit and kind of refine them to however you like. That's sometimes the glory of like a cheaper knife, is just customizing it to your own wants. All right, so one thing I will always promise you guys is that I will keep things straight with you guys and honest, or as honest as I can be. And sometimes I make mistakes and stuff too. But BeaverCraft did send me this knife to review, and as I said earlier, I am greatly appreciative of that. However, this is actually my second Dusk knife I've had. The first one, I was doing a tip test, and well, I broke the tip off. Now, I'm going to just straight up say this too. I think tip tests are kind of stupid. I think they're just kind of stupid. You do not need to do a tip test on a knife. If you're doing a tip test, you're just asking for problems. However, what's more important here is that, yes, I did break the tip off, but I emailed BeaverCraft and they immediately sent me out another one. So what's more so important overall here, the moral of the story, is that they actually stand by their product. I've had knife companies, I've had much more expensive knife companies that I've had issues with that they do not stand by their product. I won't mention any names right now, but it is awesome that BeaverCraft actually does stand by their product. And as long as you don't abuse the knife like I was doing here, then it's going to last you and be just fine. And we have to remember, this is a $45 knife. We're going to talk about the leather sheath. Overall, for a $45 knife, it's a leather pouch type of sheath, and it does have kind of the old school type of, I guess you would call it a snap. Knife just feeds in there, and then you just cinch this down, and it does actually retain the knife. I've seen some of them where it doesn't retain the knife very good, but this one actually does retain the knife pretty decently. If I was going to pick anything different, I would say make it more of like just a basic pouch sheath where the leather itself retains it instead of this whole clasp thing. But that being said, it's hard to complain for, you know, a sub $50 knife. And just try to do some feather sticks with a Dusk knife. Now this part here is where a Scandi grind probably would actually come in handy. If that's what you're wanting. Not too bad. All right, so I keep getting stuck to my gloves here. Another task I'm going to try here, just see if it can strike a ferro rod. It does actually pretty decently. It does have this jimping right there, and the jimping will kind of strike a ferro rod. If I could change anything with this, I would almost. There's some knives I like jimping on and some knives I don't. This is one of those knives that I don't think jimping is called for. I would just completely remove that jimping on there, because that would be more of the ideal spot to strike a ferro rod. However, even going towards that second half of the blade, it still does strike a ferro rod pretty decently. All right, so I'm gonna wrap up my review of the BeaverCraft Dusk knife. My overall thoughts and impressions on it. For 45 bucks, this is an awesome knife. Honestly, I don't see why you wouldn't have one. If you're a knife enthusiast or a bushcraft enthusiast, even if you have high-end knives, which I do, having some just more budget knives, one, they're just kind of fun to play with regardless, but two, it's always nice to have some budget knives just in case of, like, you know, I'll probably just keep this one here at the camp just to have as like a backup to a backup to a backup to a backup type of thing. And also, you know, it's also nice to have just some budget knives laying around, just in case if you get those new guys running around and you're trying to show them some stuff, and anybody who's ever lended a knife out to somebody knows that it's a pretty big gamble. You're kind of like, okay, what are they going to do to jack up my knife type of thing. And so that's where knives like this really comes in handy, to just hand it off to that, you know, new guy, or even that kid that you're training, that responsible kid that you're training, that, you know they're going to just jack it up in some ways. And, you know, this is pretty overall just a good user knife. Now, like I said, I did have the one with the tip break off. That's kind of uncalled for on my behalf. You know, tip testing is, I'm always kind of reluctant on doing tip testing on a knife review, just because on one hand it's kind of nice to know like what a knife can take, but at the same time it is just unnecessary abuse, really, honestly. So, you know, actually tell me in the comments below what you guys think. Is tip testing necessary or not really? But would I suggest this knife overall? Yes. Should grab one of these if you want, just to have like a backup to a backup to a backup knife. And with all that being said, be prepared both physically and spiritually. God bless, and carry on.